Welcome to FedSavvy Strategies Let's GovConsider It, where we explore all things GovCon with industry experts. We're excited to welcome Dr. Dolores Kuchina-Musina to discuss the pros and cons of government contracting versus commercial and some of the tough questions you need to ask yourself before approaching any market.
All right. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our next episode here. I know we left off with a lot of really good information and really good notes. And one of I think the best topics to kick off for this one, just so that we can take a deep dive into the discussion, is exploring your technology, finding the value in that technology, and how do you know if it's going to be a good fit within the GovCon space? I think this is a question that whether you're a brand new company or you're a very well-established organization, this question comes up again and again of, hey, do I belong in this space? And what makes it, I think, very difficult, Brian, and I'm sure you hear this a lot too, is, well, I know I want to do business with Department of Defense. They have a ton, like they have a huge budget, right? They have a ton of money, so I'm following the money. And of course, everyone wants to do business with the cool kid in school because they're going to have the biggest budget. They have the most solicitations. They're the ones that are posting a lot. But it's hard to really assess, does my technology, does my solution make sense for the DoD? Maybe it makes sense somewhere else. And then you start going into all those questions that you and I had talked about in some of the other episodes. I think when it comes to assessing your value, you have to be able, as I know on the commercial side, it's very similar. You have to know what problem you're solving for that client. And if the problem that you're solving is, well, they don't have my technology, it's not a problem that you're going to be very successful with. So you could have the best technology ever. If you don't know how to pitch it to the government, you're not going to go anywhere. The government has a very small attention span. And if it does not fit in within their mission, if it does not fit in with what their initiatives are in the next 2-3 years, they're not going to be seeing it as a viable solution. The other challenge that you have that I think that's really unique to the GovCon space is that there are technologies and solutions being developed that we as a public do not have access to knowing or being able to know where they are in the process of developing it. So something that could be very unique in the commercial space, there might be already a version of it being developed, worked on, or modified for the government specifically. And so you have to know that. How do you know that? Well, you have to do market research. You have to know your competition. And we talked about this in one of the previous episodes of like knowing what your differentiators are. You're not going to know that unless you do your market research. The good thing is that what the government does when they do government research is that, and market research, is that they do industry days, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. What a better way for you to get a look into your competition than going to those types of events and seeing what the conversation is. I think the other piece of figuring out your value is seeing how well you can pitch to the problem. Every single office, every single end user in the DoD has their own unique problems. And Dolores's opinion here, but I think this is where veterans do really well with Department of Defense because they have firsthand experience what those problems are. So aside from Department of Defense, when you're looking at Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, don't think that just their like overall mission is what you should be pitching to, because they also have issues with managing data. They have human resource needs. They have talent needs. They have needs for understanding what's available in the market. They don't have the same resources that some other offices may have in order for them to tap into it. So finding your value, I think, really starts at the core of you have to know who your competition is, and you have to know what the mission set is or what the initiatives and the strategy is for that government agency. That's like your starting point. From there, you have to do a deep dive into some research to see what are some of the solicitations that are being put out, how are they scoping the work, with the mindset that it's not perfect. The government only knows what they know, just like you only have the data that you have, which is where that market research is so essential. I know, Brian, there's a lot of opportunities where you talk to a lot of companies about like market fit and things like that. What are you finding in your observations of what's different about finding your fit or your value with the GovCon space versus like the commercial space versus investor space, things like that?
Yeah, no, as you were, I think, going through some really great observations, Dolores, it does bring up some good points in terms of how to explore and not just go pitch. Here's my cool whiz bang toy. Don't you want to buy my toy? Which is unfortunately what some folks think is the way to go about it. I, interesting. I guess when I look at the government space, one of the themes you think you hit on, what I thought was very interesting, though, is that they're going to be conservative in terms of how they approach things, but also to do that market research. I think the other part about it is you have to understand what is currently in use, what technology is currently in use at an agency that you think, perhaps start with what does my tech do? What might be use cases for my tech? Now, how does this align with maybe a mission of not just the entire Army? That's a pretty big organization. So let's get a little bit more fidelity in there, dig it at a lower level. And then from there, I'd be curious, can you define what technology they already have that might be used to solve a problem that you think you can solve? And that incumbent technology in a way is a parallel to, let's say, if you're going after incumbent service contracts, what are they doing right now? And then how are you, what is your offering aligned to how you can do it better? Or
Mhm.
can you? And even if you think that the incumbent technology is terrible, or, oh God, that was cool back in 1970. Well, yeah, and that may be true, but there's also a switching cost and a switching risk that those users will encounter, even though it may be some old technology that is there's better things for it, but it could be that technology is very low risk, and that's something that I know when I look at evaluations. Often, one of the resounding themes of winners, whether it be a service bid or something else like we're talking about here, is that what's the risk of me implementing what you're offering? If the risk is either poorly defined to understand what it is, or the risk was like, I'm kind of swinging for the fence here. This might be a really cool thing, but it could be horrible. There could be so many unintended consequences here we can't measure or we can see our risks. That would make my pitch go straight to hell because it's the juice is not worth the squeeze. I mean, come back when you're more mature, come back when you can define what the risks are. And that's a big part of this. That one of the themes in government, whether it be civilian service or military service, is risk. Is how
Mhm.
you define risk, how do you mitigate risk, and to articulate what the risk of switching is, but also understand that there are other sunk costs that if I'm an agency and I've just spent, I don't know, $5 million on a software product, and you come to me a year after I've implemented this, hey, I got a better toy for you. Guess what, buddy? I got 5 million bucks. I already sunk into this. I can't get out. Now, can I? It may be cool. Maybe your toy is generally cooler. Maybe it's a legitimately better product, but I don't have the budget for it. I'm too invested, and maybe perceived are too invested. That becomes a real problem. That you may be right. I think also in terms of market fit and market analysis, what you're talking about, Dolores, the way to do that homework right, certainly talk to users. That's optimal. You can do things using things like I like a resource like itdashboard.gov is one resource where you can see the major technology investments in a lot of ways what the US government is buying and what they have of legacy technology.
Mhm.
And in there, sometimes you can actually see, you can begin to pull apart what the tech stack actually looks like. That I find useful for my own purposes in a lot of ways. It's not perfect. Like anything else, it is not a perfect, there's not a ground truth of everything you want to know. But if you can see, oh, this is built on this technology, now I can know what might be the switching costs or risk, or it's a good product that we're not going to be able to beat for whatever reason. So at least you understand you're getting yourself into before you make a fool out of yourself or spend time and money going after something that frankly you had a snowball's chance of hell of winning in the first place. So
Yeah.
get real, move on to the next target because you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. Like I like to study someone before I engage them so I don't look like a fool for one, but also I want to pay them respect and say, listen, I did my homework. Here's what I think is what we can do, as opposed to getting in there. Like, I could have figured that out with some due diligence for about 10 minutes if I was going to be a hard worker, right? So I think these are some things that, to get to your point, how do you understand? How do you understand your fit? How do you understand the angle? How do you do your market research? That you can do. And I think part of it is also, how do you articulate what those core benefits are? Is what I'm going to give you, is this going to be a cost reducer of, let's say, lifetime sustainment costs? Is this a risk reducer? Is because mine is proven to be more reliable at 99.999, whatever the hell percent, and we've proven this, then that can sell. I mean, those benefits, to articulate those benefits, I think are actually pretty darn important, as opposed to, look at this cool thing, all the bells and whistles. And for the most part, the users who receive that are going to be going, don't care, not interested. Um, Please get to the point sometime before I die of old age.
Mhm.
That that fit, because that's the mindset. It's not the coolest, fastest, neatest thing. Is often more, can you reduce my cost of how I spend my money, and can you reduce the risk of performance? And I will tell you time and time again, as I look at the evaluations of contract bids, those two themes resonate constantly, and especially in the government space, right? So those are, you bring up some interesting points that made me think about these things a little bit more thoroughly. But those are some themes and some resources that I think people can leverage before they go in there and have their pitch fall flat, or they keep knocking on doors that are frankly never going to open for them.
Yeah, and you bring up such a good point about legacy systems, and also just, when you're talking to, like, when you're pitching, being sure that you have enough information, that you are going in knowing enough about not only that agency but the person you're meeting with. And you made me think of, last year I was at a conference, and one of the speakers was saying, she's in acquisitions. And she said, if I jump on a call and it's very evident to me that, one, you don't know anything about my office or me, in terms of like what I'm responsible for and what my mission set is, you've already lost me. So if
Mm.
I enter the call, because all of these people, and I get that getting 5 minutes with the government is stressful enough. Okay. Inboxes, you're somewhere in the email, you're trying to figure out how do you coordinate calendars, you're trying to move everything. With all of that work that you just put in to have that 5-10 minute call with the government to get their attention, you do not want to come into that call not knowing who the person is, not knowing what you're talking about. And sometimes there's surprises, right? Sometimes it's not the
Always.
person that you were meeting with, but you have to know. I mean, you cannot go in and say like, oh, hey, I don't know anything about you, but let me tell you about my technology. Even just on a human element, right? If you were
Yeah.
going to meet someone and you haven't at least like looked at their LinkedIn profile or tried to do some kind of Google search on their company, you're already behind the ball. Like, you're trying to catch up when the other person has on the government side, they would probably have your capability statement. They would have pulled up your sam.gov account. They have some kind of knowledge of who you are. Whether they read it all is a different thing, but they at least saw that you're a small business, or they saw that you're some kind of set aside, or you're a large business, where you're located, and what potentially you might offer, because you're responding to some kind of call to action. There's something that you provided to them, and they're taking that call because something in that caught their attention.
Yep.
So you want to go into that call. The legacy system thread that I want to pull on is, I could hear a lot of like software developers and people that are in the new tech on the commercialization stage. They're like, the government has been talking about modernizing for 40 years. Like, where are they? And the truth is, you have to be prepared for everything. Do not assume that the government is all on Windows 365. Do not assume that they're all using Microsoft Outlook. And by God, don't assume that they're not using DOS. There are still offices within the government that are on DOS systems. So when they talk about, integration, when they talk about being able to work with various types of software, platforms, do your due diligence, ask what they're using, especially if you don't know if you're able to connect with that system. If you're not sure that your platform can support a 1995 Windows 95 platform, you might want to ask that question, because don't assume that they are actually modernized to today or even 10 years ago. And that's not by fault of the government. That's more so of a situation where some of these systems have been implemented and the government may be stuck in their contract in using those systems, or it might be an issue of they've been stuck in a long-term contract, or they may have not found another solution that works as effectively as this one. So you have to ask those questions, and you have to know, not just so you have to have a good discovery session with the government as well, from everything that you can't find. And I think that's really essential. So that piece about legacy systems is like, yeah, we have to touch on that.
Right. It is. And yeah, I'm gonna have to maybe a sound effect in this with that sad trombone sound in the background. That wah wah. Those failures of doing the initial research should be playing in the back of your mind. And one thing also in terms of as you prospect with the government, and there's the technology discussion that we were going through, and the how you would approach that, the features and benefits, but also in a way this sort of ties into how you expand opportunities is the barriers to entry. And the barriers to entry may be your lack of familiarity with those legacy systems. You have to somehow find a way to use or work with and sing kumbaya with and make sure it can work, because there could be a very valid reason, like you illustrated a lot of very valid reasons that it's there. So accept it. It's part of the landscape. Either you can turn your nose up at it. Okay, great. Or you can find a way to make it work. And I think those who will find a way to make it work are the ones who are going to win. And the others who either won't find a way to make it work or can't are the ones who are going to have to move on. So, and beyond it, is how do you, as you do this research, one of the biggest questions I always ask in my own business practice is not just what they buy, how they buy. The how they buy is also extremely important here, because there may be a mechanism of how that agency buys that could be a deal breaker for you. In terms of, as you look at how that agency buys, are they mostly doing full and open contracts? Are they doing set asides? Are there certain vehicles they use where they're embracing SIBRs and OTAs quite a lot to get things done? Because that's the path. Because if you come in there with let's say you kill it in the pitch, you go, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I want more of this, but you haven't understood or figured out how to actually get to them, to get to the line that is dotted and sign on the line that is dotted, and then get the revenue as a result of that winning contract. That is critical. But also beyond we're going to talk about some of the procurement approaches here, is I'd want to know not just what the technology is, but who's who in the zoo.
Yeah.
Who are the primes who are there right now? Because I hate to break it to you, think about them as sort of the mafia, because they're the ones who are the insiders. They're the made men, and they're there. You love them or hate them, but whether you love them or hate them doesn't matter, because you may have to find a way to work with them, and they may have the secret handshake to keep their position, but they also could be your friends. And to understand what they're doing specifically, how do they factor into the technology environment? Are they just, kind of a service contract that may be interchangeable? Is there some piece of tech that they built that you may have to find a way to work with? And that could be a path. In our last episode, we talked about sort of the path of the prime and the sub. And this does factor into this thing, because you get down to brass tacks of how am I going to get in there and get a deal done, to understand who's who in the zoo might also help reveal what technology is being used right now. If there's some flagship product that a certain business uses, that can also tell you quite a lot. So that is a very critical aspect about this. And frankly, Are you replacing something entirely, or are you simply augmenting something?
Hmm.
Your solution may be a complete replacement, which to me would be more risky.
Yeah.
Or maybe, you know what? Actually, if I can find a way to integrate this into X, I can enhance the operation. I'm not going to replace it. I'm going to add some features to it that might make it a little bit more palpable,
Mhm.
or acceptable by a customer. Well, you know what? You're going from version 1.1 to 1.2. I like this. This is good. I mean, this is a good thing. And frankly, are you as a business even ready for live TV? If you're some small boutique player, you may want to rethink about your approach. Maybe it's better to tack on board with a Prime and work with them as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to do it myself.
Yeah.
They could be my benefactor, perhaps. They could be my Sherpa. So these are things to be considered about, not just the technology piece, but also what is I wouldn't necessarily say a competitor environment. What's the business environment of an agency? All these things have got to factor into your calculus as you do some 3D chess and try to find a way to win the
Mhm.
game.